everyone, thanks for tuning in. Here's another episode on how this Grand Wagoneer is coming along. Previously, on the last episode, I worked on repairing the frame and the leaf springs and suspension and axle and stuff and brake lines, just getting it back on the wheels. This episode, hopefully it ends the way I want it to, where the whole engine's back together and it's awesome. But realistically, right now for this episode, I'm just going to be focusing on getting the timing chain kit reinstalled, getting the timing chain cover reinstalled, and hopefully I can also get the oil pan reinstalled. I think that's a great starting point, and let's see where we go. So I ordered this bad boy. I ordered a timing chain kit and it was wrong. So I returned it. And then I ordered another one and I confirmed that it was right. And it was not right. So that got returned as well. Now, third time, lucky charm. Doesn't look like the photo, but it's gonna work. So I'm just going to use it, ready to go, get installed. Which is great, because I've been waiting about a month, which has been very frustrating. But that is the reality of working on a car. Sometimes the parts, they're just hard to come by for whatever reason, but that's okay. That's what we're gonna be doing today. As I waited that month, I wanted to do a couple things. I have been working on the Jeep, but I have been cautious to not create a lot of dirt or like dust or whatever, because my oil pan is not on. The inside of the engine is kind of exposed to the elements of the garage. So I have been very careful on what work I do to keep my engine clean. This is what I've done. I finished up the front grille insert, which means I cleaned it with one of these guys, more like 4 of these guys. Welded all the little cracks and rust holes, filled it all in, did a little bit of Bondo work, painted it up. I have also worked on all of the other parts of the engine that I had to take off. A fan, AC compressor, oil pan. You can see where I welded it up to. Driver's side wheel well, the passenger side wheel well. Timing chain cover, new gaskets, oil pump, new gasket, new oil filter, oil pan gasket kit, water pump and timing chain cover gasket kit, my alternator, the pulley that goes after the harmonic balancer, a new water pump, my point system distributor, cleaned up the horns, cleaned up another pulley, my harmonic balancer, right there. And then in that box is my new fuel pump. I also replaced the door, as well as the turn signals. I worked on those too. I'm getting really close to switching out that timing chain cover. Now, before I do, there's a couple things that I am taking note of before I start taking things apart. So let's take a look at it. So this is where the harmonic balancer goes. As you can see right here, there's a little notch. So it will only go in at one angle or one degree. And the other thing to note is, it's kind of hard to see here, but this knob at the very top is top dead center. Here it is on my new to me timing chain cover. The reason why that's important is this part of working on an engine gets a lot of people, even professionals, it can stump them. It's the timing when the distributor has to line up with the motor and everything. So in order to do it properly, I recommend watching a ton of videos that are specific just for the vehicle you're working on, because it can be different depending on what vehicle you have. With me, I had to use a breaker bar and I had to turn my harmonic balancer until this line marked up with that top dead center indication right here on the actual Jeep. Now, once that is done, I know that my number 1 cylinder is all the way up. And then when I take off my cap and distributor, I'm going to be marking off where each one of my spark plug wires go, as well as how the distributor is set up. So when I put everything back in, my distributor is going to be lined up with the motor, and then my cap will be lined up with the distributor, all at top dead center, which is when the number 1 piston is at the very highest rate before it starts to come back down. Knowing those things will save you a ton of time and a ton of frustration. I'll probably mess it up myself and have to redo it a couple times, but at least I know kind of what to look out for. The majority of the time, you're not gonna be taking off the harmonic balancer. You're just gonna be like upgrading your distributor or replacing it with one that works. I am kind of doing an extra step here with taking off that harmonic balancer, but knowing that it is lined up before I take it off will definitely help me putting it back on. So with all of that knowledge out of the way, let's look at what I still have to do. There's a couple bolts left holding on the actual timing chain cover itself. Before I get to those, this whole unit right here, which is where my oil pump is, I'm gonna be replacing in this area. This is my fuel pump. It's a mechanical fuel pump that ties into my timing chain cover. In order to replace this, I have to take off the inlet and outlet feeds. So this is my inlet feed, and then this one right here is my outlet feed. So being really careful that those come off, marking them. As you can see, there's two of them. Right now, it's pretty obvious where things go, but when they're all drooping down and stuff, you've done a lot of steps, it's easy to forget. So take pictures, mark it, tape it up, do whatever you need to do. I'm not gonna tape it up because I have all these videos. I get to look back and make sure I can put stuff back properly. So, things I still need to do: install that track bar that has just been dangling about. One of the bushings had to be replaced. The bolt was just rust welded into it. I cut the bolt out so I could get the bar off. I tried pressing just the bolt out and took the whole bushing with it. So I just got a new one. That's installed, ready to go. The hiccup with that is because I have a lift kit, that means I have a bracket that needs to be installed to re-angulate the math on it. So this guy should technically just line up with that. The problem is it lines up to be the exact same size when it should actually just leave inside of it. I'll probably just cut and weld this on. Once that's done, track bar can go in, that can be done. Another thing I need to do, my sway bar, the frame on one side, I need to remake that bracket that it bolts into. I ordered some stuff totally wrong, even though the website said totally right. And then I ordered another set that should have been in 2 days ago. Don't know where it is. My sway bar is kind of waiting on shipping, I guess. So, with all that being said, I do have some good news. If you already noticed, I have two wheel well inserts for the passenger side. So another thing that I need to do to take off this timing chain cover is I need to drop the oil pan. So I have to take out all the oil, take that pan off, and then I can start addressing the front of the motor again. And this is why right here, so this is where my oil pan would bolt up to. What I recommend always is get the actual gasket instead of just using gasket maker. A gasket will always outlast gasket maker when it's done properly. At least that's my experience. So my oil is almost out. So I started working on disconnecting that fuel pump. It's gonna have to come out before the timing chain does. Here's why. This is how the pump looks. There's this shaft part that goes inside. This is just gonna get caught up, so I'm gonna try and remove it separately, and then I can install this one after the new timing chain cover is put in. For removing this fuel pump, there is a couple things we wanna do. The first one is use our 1/2-inch wrench on our outlet hose for fuel, which is right up here. Then what you want to do is disconnect your soft line. Now there's two bolts that hold this thing in right here, and then the last one is just on the other side. So we already started on removing some of the things to get this timing chain cover off. Now we already started with getting rid of that harmonic balancer. You have to get a puller for this if you don't have one. It's the only way to do it. Next thing we need to do is drain out the oil pan, which I just did. Then we can unbolt the oil pan, have that drop out. The bottom part of this timing chain cover is ready to come off. We've already removed the water pump, as brutal as that was, the fuel pump and the distributor, and then it should be ready to come out. This is how I mark off my distributor. I don't do it by the actual firing order. Instead, I just pick the one closest to me. I make that number 1, and then I mark with a piece of tape as well as on the actual cap where my number 1 is. I record what direction I'm gonna be traveling in, so clockwise, and then I just go 1, 2, 3, all the way over to 8 with M for the one in the middle. That way when I take all this stuff off, I can have them drooping wherever they go. When it comes time to putting it all back in, I can 1, refer to this video, and 2, it just makes sense to me to do it this way. I know it's not the firing order. This kind of makes something complicated simple. Okay, so now after you marked off where all of the spark plug wires go, now it's time to take the actual cap off. In order to do that, sometimes there's little screws that go around holding it in. Other times there's these metal clamps that pop up. So I got the metal clamp. I'm gonna just use a flathead, pop those clamps off, then that cap can come out. Okay, so right here is the last bolt. This bolt holds it down, and when you tighten it, it prevents it from spinning, so you can't advance or retard the time once you have it dialed in. So this is the very last bolt. Okay, so this is how that bolt looks with that little bracket that holds down the distributor. Okay, so we got that distributor out now. Something I want to point out is a lot of people will upgrade this for one that is electronic. This is a point system, meaning that inside there is a rotor that spins and hits each point, which does the job. Old school. A lot of people upgrade it, but what they do is they do not keep this old gear. And the reason why that's a problem is they put the new one in, the new gear completely destroys the old gear that's inside the motor. The best way to do it is replace the gear inside, but that's a lot of work. So the second best option is to take off this old gear and put it on your new distributor before you install it. That way, these teeth line up with the teeth on the gear, you're good to go. So, we got our harmonic balancer off. We got our fuel pump off. We got the distributor off. This is the replacement timing chain cover that's gonna go in. As I take stuff off, I take the bolts and I just thread them into where they go by hand. The water pump has been taken off and replaced. This is the new fuel pump that's gonna be going in as well. I'm having a lot of fun building this Jeep and just taking my time and enjoying it. It does kind of suck that it is COVID and I'm kind of doing it by myself, but I can kind of take this away as like meditation almost for me, so I really do enjoy doing the work. If this type of stuff frustrates you, then definitely have like a friend or a dad or a son or someone or a daughter or mother, anyone, just have someone help you build it. It makes it so much better when someone else is there and they have another set of eyes and you can joke around. I am enjoying this work a lot, just trying to find like a good balance in my life, and kind of like this whole front end with the timing chain, there's all these different parts that have to work together, and I'm starting to realize the parts in my life that I'm trying to get figured out. So they're working together. Yeah, it's been really good, really meditative. Okay, so now since you're all cut up, now I'm gonna install that timing chain kit. Okay, so if you're not sure on how much slack is acceptable with a timing chain, here's a really great example of the new one installed. So it has a very small amount of movement, but a lot less than what was there before. So here are some tips. Okay, so for setting your engine at top dead center, I know there's going to be questions, do I do the compression stroke or the exhaust stroke? It literally depends on what car you have. For mine, it is compression stroke. It's just where the valves are. Now the gears themselves have a little keyhole like this, so they can only go in one way. My crankshaft, which is here, has options where it can advance, A, or retard, R, my position on this gear. Now the reason why someone might want to do that is if they want higher end RPM power versus lower end RPM power, that's when you move around that gear. I'm not gonna be doing anything crazy with this car. I just want to enjoy it. So I'm just gonna leave it stock. When the timing chain kit is fully installed, what it should look like is this large gear and small gear. They should be lined up perfectly so the chain doesn't have any bind in it. When you tighten it down, there should be no play back and forth with the gear. Okay, so I started getting that cover installed, and for the bolts that hold that timing chain cover to the block, also hold the water pump to the timing chain cover. So what I ended up doing is I installed both. So this is how it's looking at the moment. Okay, so now with the timing chain kit, the cover for it, as well as the water pump installed, I'm gonna move to the bottom part of the motor and install the oil pan. Once I'm done installing the oil pan, the motor will kind of be sealed up again. I can put oil back in it, which will be nice. And I can focus on putting all of the serpentine belt accessories back on. I'll get the motor buttoned up, and then once that's done, I can start installing these larger pieces like the grille support, wheel wells, and then once I'm at that stage, the front end is pretty much done, other than installing the fenders and putting the hood back on after I paint it. So when it comes to installing the oil pan, you always want to work from the middle and work your way out to each end. All right guys, so I am installing the harmonic balancer, and I went and got the right toolkit so I can do the job properly. The last thing you want to do is smack it on with a mallet, because you're going to mess up all the bearings on the crankshaft. You can rent these. That's what I did. Turned out that all of the threads were different than the bolt that actually goes in. And this is the bolt that holds my harmonic balancer in place. So the workaround, if the thread that you're trying to work with doesn't match the kit, you can just go to any bolt store and you bring the bolt with you and just say, hey, I need a rod with this thread pattern and a couple nuts to go on it. The last thing you want to do is strip the threads inside of your crankshaft, because that's it. If you mess that up, then you do a lot more, like a lot of work. Okay, so now since the harmonic balancer is installed, I can work on installing the serpentine pulley that would bolt up to it. Okay, so I lost a ton of footage of putting the rest of the motor back together. In terms of being done with the engine part of this build, there's still one last thing I need to do for the motor itself. Now, that is my distributor. People who have a vehicle with one of these point system setups, they go HEI. It's a very simple setup, and it makes an electronic system, which is a lot more reliable, which is kind of the theme I'm trying to go with. I will kind of go over why I picked the one I did, and then how to install it. That was the last thing to finish up the motor. Here are my 3 different cooling systems. The little one is an extra cooler for the transmission fluid. The towing package from the factory kind of looked like this. This was the replacement. The one behind it that is black, that is for my AC. In addition to getting that, something to note, I also had to get, I think it's a condenser, which is this. And then there's like this L-shaped piping that if you work on one of these, you know those tubes kind of rust out. I had the local shop make me one rated for AC. And the other side of this condenser would plug in right here. And then this one is part of the AC that plugs in right up here. Battery is finally in. This was off of like a 98 XJ. I was able to use the original fan shroud, which I think is always a nice thing. Now, I can't remember what this is called, but there's a filter that goes in the bottom, and I know what it does. If you don't have this, it'll just reek of gas. So this lacks gas fumes to my knowledge. If I'm wrong, so be it, correct me, let me know. I'm pretty sure that's what that does. So I put a new filter on, it was like 10 bucks. This is also new. It's just an air intake hose. I'll put the link up to where I got this. I also wired up my fog lights and did all of that. Another thing I did, and I think this is probably the better area to show you, any and all wire protector on both sides, like everywhere, I replaced it. And as I replaced it, I looked at all of the wires and made sure that they were clean, okay to go. Wasn't any hard spots. Something that took a little bit longer than I would have hoped for was this wheel well insert. It just wasn't bolting up right, so I took a bit longer than I wanted to, but I cut the whole front end of it off and redid all of these bolt holes. So now it lines up the way it should. If you want me to explain more stuff in the video itself, let me know. I don't want to be too tedious, but I also want to try and be informative, like the bigger picture stuff, while I'm doing the things I'm doing, just the mindset itself. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned, because in the next video, my goal is to get this engine running. If there's anything that you're hoping to see me work on in a future video, let me know, and I'll try and make a note of it to put an emphasis on it later on. With that being said, thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate everyone who has subscribed and hit the bell. I'm pretty excited that I'm this close to starting the engine. I'm excited to share that with you too, so tune in next time. Have a great day. Enjoy whatever it is that you do.